I am 29 years old and I have always been the outsider in my own family. From the very first day, my younger brother Alex, who is now 22 years old, was considered the golden child, incapable of any wrongdoing. My parents, 50-year-old Karen and 58-year-old Dave, literally adored him, while I had to deal with all difficulties on my own. It began as early as childhood. In old family photos, my father and mother look at Alex with admiration, while I am often only half in the picture. And that is no exaggeration. The difference in treatment was so obvious that it hurt physically. When my brother needed new electronics or sports equipment, they bought them for him the same day without hesitation. But when my laptop broke during high school finals week, my father looked at me as if I were asking him for a kidney. He explained that I would have to get through it on my own. After all, they weren't printing money. So I sat in the public library to do my assignments, while Alex played on a computer that cost more than my first car. I came home around midnight and found them laughing happily in the living room. They didn't notice my problems at all. My gift for my 12th birthday was a $15 gift card for a video game store. My mother had probably gotten it for free when buying things for Alex, because on the back there was still a gift sticker that she had forgotten to remove. When my brother turned 12, he got a complete gaming station with a new console, a special chair, and a huge curved monitor. That package was more expensive than all my gifts from the previous years combined. The inequality was not only visible in material things. Alex's mediocre scribbles hung proudly on the fridge with magnets, while my architectural drawings for school projects, which won competitions, were ignored. In 11th grade, I won a regional design competition and a scholarship for $1,000, but my parents missed the awards ceremony because Alex had a regular baseball game. His C's in math were celebrated with a trip to an amusement park on the pretext that he had tried so hard and deserved a break. My 3.8 GPA, on the other hand, was taken for granted, without a single word of praise. After I went to college on a partial scholarship, I quickly realized that Alex was the king in our house, and I was the peasant who had to be happy with the crumbs from the rich man's table. The relatives saw this unfair distribution of attention. Uncle Tom once noticed that my brother could be cheeky with impunity, while I was punished for the same behavior. My mother got so angry at the time that she didn't speak to him for months. My best friend Jake was the only one who truly understood the situation. He saw this favoritism with his own eyes, and we discussed it for hours at his house. His family was normal. The children were treated equally, which made the atmosphere in my home even more unbearable. In high school, Jake stopped coming to my place because he felt uncomfortable watching my parents' behavior. He openly called them toxic, and he was right. But when you grow up in such an environment, you start to believe that you yourself are the problem. For years, I tried to earn their love, kept my room spotless, excelled at school, never got into trouble, and was polite to their friends. Nothing helped. Eventually, I gave up seeking their approval, as it seemed impossible. Over the years, the situation only got worse. When I graduated from high school with honors, I got a card with $100. It was a simple card from the supermarket, not even with a personal message, just their signatures. They didn't come to the ceremony where I was honored as the top student. 2 years later, Alex graduated from school with barely passing grades. He was given a new Ford Mustang worth over $40,000. My father threw a luxurious party with a DJ and catering and gave a speech about how proud he was of his son, who had supposedly overcome difficulties, even though my brother was in reality just lazy and spoiled. That celebration cost more than they had spent on me in my entire last year of school. I had to work night shifts at an Amazon warehouse to pay for my studies at a state college, while my parents used up all their savings and took out a second loan to send their favorite to New York University. They helped him move, bought furniture, and paid him a monthly allowance of $1,000. I found this out by accident when my brother accidentally sent me a screenshot of the transfer that was actually meant for his friend. I myself took the bus to my college with 2 suitcases. In my room, there were plastic crates instead of shelves, while Alex had a fully furnished apartment with a huge TV and a leather sofa. Every one of my achievements was dismissed as insignificant, while his D+ was celebrated as if he had solved the problem of world hunger. When I called home to report my academic successes, my mother wouldn't listen for more than 30 seconds before turning the conversation to my brother's incredible deeds. I was studying at the most demanding architecture faculty, working 30 hours a week and maintaining a 3.7 GPA. But for them, that had no meaning at all. All this led to serious anger issues. I felt that my efforts would never be enough. My freshman year roommate even asked for a transfer because my constant tension was robbing him of sleep. That was a wake-up call for me. I needed a way to channel the anger peacefully, and that's how I came to a boxing studio near the campus. The studio owner, Cole, was an old-school guy, a former Marine who looked like a tank. His face bore the scars of many fights, but his eyes were amazingly kind. The studio was in an old warehouse. It smelled of sweat and disinfectant, and heavy punching bags hung from the ceiling. Cole saw my inner anger and took me under his wing. He said I hit the bag as if it owed me money, but my technique was terrible. He spent hours teaching me the correct stance and striking technique. Boxing became my therapy. 3 times a week, I let all my pent-up anger out in the studio. It was the only place where I was judged by my merits. Cole always said that in the ring, only hard work and heart count. I slept better and could focus better on my studies. Within 6 months, I lost 15 pounds of fat, built muscle, and improved my skills so much that Cole offered me the chance to compete in an amateur tournament. I didn't win, but I made it to the semifinals, which was an excellent result for a beginner. Meanwhile, Alex became more and more brazen. He could call his parents at 2 in the morning and demand money for urgent emergencies, which were actually expenses for nightclubs. If they didn't send money immediately, he would start emotionally manipulating them, claiming they wanted to leave him lonely while others were having fun. And they believed him every time. My mother would call me after such nighttime incidents, worried about my brother's social status, not even thinking that I might need to sleep before my 5 o'clock shift at the warehouse. My brother never learned self-reliance because my parents always solved his problems before the consequences could set in. If he failed an exam, they talked to the professor. If he exceeded his credit card limit, they paid the debt. When he was caught with drugs in the dorm, they hired him a lawyer. Even when he wrecked his Mustang because he was inattentive, they bought him a new car and handled everything with the insurance. There was no mistake they weren't willing to correct for him. Meanwhile, I worked myself to the bone to afford books and cheap food. My social life was limited to the boxing studio. In my second year, I came down with a severe case of pneumonia. With a fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit, I could barely get out of bed and missed a week of work. My manager at the warehouse demanded a doctor's note, which I had no money for. I swallowed my pride and called home. My father answered that I needed to be more responsible with my finances and that they couldn't constantly bail me out. To pay my rent, I had to pawn my laptop. When Cole found out, he secretly gave me extra hours doing maintenance at the studio so I could buy my computer back. My attempts to talk to my parents about the injustice always ended with me being called too sensitive or envious. Karen claimed they had always treated us equally, and that was such a blatant lie that I was speechless. Last year, I finally got a job as a junior architect at a small firm with a salary of $65,000. I was happy to finally be independent, but as soon as I told my parents, they started pressuring me. They explained that as the older brother, I was obligated to help Alex with his expenses for his master's degree. He hadn't even finished his bachelor's yet, but I was already supposed to set aside 30% of my income for the family's needs. When I mentioned my student loans and living expenses, my mother said I should have thought about that earlier before settling for such a poorly paid job. For an entry-level position, it was good money, and they hadn't invested a cent in my education. In their opinion, I should sacrifice my own future for my brother. Years of guilt tripping had taken effect, and I reluctantly agreed to send them $200 every month. But secretly, I began saving for my own furniture manufacturing business. I had a clear plan, but it needed starting capital. Jake thought I was crazy for giving them anything at all. He understood that I was being exploited like a wallet, while nothing was asked of Alex, who had a cushy job through connections. My friend was right, but cutting those family ties proved more difficult than I thought. It was like being in a cult. You recognize that the situation is bad, but over time you get so used to it that a normal state seems strange. I kept sending the transfers, but with each transfer, my outrage grew. When I scrolled through Alex's social media, I saw him eating in expensive restaurants, taking weekend trips, and buying designer clothes. Meanwhile, I was eating cheap pasta 4 times a week to save every cent. A change was brewing, and then something incredible happened. I won $375,000 in the state lottery. This is the absolute truth. I sat there staring at the ticket for about 20 minutes, checking the numbers on the website over and over. My hands were literally shaking. It was exactly what I needed to realize my plans. I bought the ticket purely by chance when I went into a gas station after a tiring day at work. At the architecture firm, where I had worked for 2 years, things were going pretty well. But the pay was mediocre. $65,000 in a high cost of living region. Plus, my boss regularly appropriated my ideas. I had thought for many years about opening my own workshop for handmade furniture. On weekends, I built items in a public workshop near me and sold some online, but I lacked the capital to open a full-fledged business. The lottery win changed everything. First, I didn't tell anyone, not even Jake. I needed time to think everything through and create a plan. I met with a financial advisor who helped me sort out the taxes. After all mandatory payments, I had about $240,000 left. I decided to invest $180,000 into starting my business, $40,000 into investments for the future, and keep the rest as a reserve fund. I spent several weeks researching business plans, equipment costs, renting space, and marketing strategies. I wanted to do this seriously, but my parents found out about the money anyway, probably because the names of winners in our state are legally required to be published. They showed up at my apartment the very next day without prior notice. By that point, we hadn't seen each other for almost 6 months. There had been no big fight. Our conversations had just been so one-sided and fixated on Alex that I had stopped calling, and they rarely took the initiative. "We are so proud of you, my son," my father said, hugging me for the first time in many years. My mother brought a cake from an expensive pastry shop and said we needed to celebrate this blessing. Their sudden interest should have been a warning sign, but the part of me that had always longed for their approval was genuinely happy. I hoped this would be a turning point in our relationship, that they would finally see in me a person worthy of attention. We sat down for tea, and for about 15 minutes, everything went wonderfully. They asked about my work, my apartment, and even remembered my hobby with wood, even though they called it my carpentry hobby. Then the demands began. They didn't even try to be subtle. My parents demanded that I give them at least $200,000. This money was to be used to pay off their mortgage and to pay for Alex's elite master's program at Stanford. As it turned out, this had always been his dream, and now I would have the chance to prove myself as a good brother. I was speechless. In front of me was the unique opportunity to change my fate, and they expected me to sacrifice everything for another whim of my brother and their unwise financial decisions. When I told them that I wanted to use the money to open a furniture business, they flew into a rage. The reaction was as if I had suggested burning the banknotes before their eyes. "After everything we have done for you, you show such ingratitude," my mother screamed. The mask of the proud parents had disappeared immediately. "Is this how you thank us? With your selfishness?" At that moment, my years-long patience snapped. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked back. My father came very close. "We gave you a roof over your head and food. You ungrateful cur." I finally lost my composure. "That is the absolute minimum. You did only the bare minimum for me, but you gave Alex the whole world, and now you want my lottery money? That's not happening." The argument escalated again. My mother began to cry, employing all the emotional manipulation techniques. "I didn't raise you to be such an egoist. Where did we go wrong?" "Should I make a list?" I countered. "How about the time you didn't come to my high school graduation ceremony because Alex had a soccer game? Or when you said you couldn't help me with college tuition but raided your retirement account for his studies? Or let's remember birthdays and Christmases when he got everything he wished for and I got the clearance rack stuff." My father's face turned red. "That's not true. We always treated you both equally." "Nonsense," I said, pronouncing each word clearly. "You know what? I kept all the evidence." I took out my phone and showed them the material I had collected over the years. Screenshots of the bank transfers I had sent them, photos of Alex's expensive gifts next to my cheap things, pictures of them at his events while I was alone. That finally pushed my father over the edge. He shoved me hard against the wall. You gathered evidence against us? What kind of son does that? One who was told his whole life that his perception was wrong, I answered, pushing him away. If you touch me again, you'll regret it. My boxing coach had taught me not to throw the first punch, but I was ready to defend myself. Give us the money, Jason, my mother said in an icy voice. It's the right thing to do. My father added, then you're no longer part of this family. Don't call us and don't come by. Don't expect anything more from us. I laughed in his face. For what? When have I ever gotten anything from you? This is even better. Now the external situation matches the internal one. You never treated me as a family member. My mother made one last attempt, her voice becoming friendlier. Darling, think about what you're saying. We are your parents. We love you and want what's best for everyone. You only want my money, I cut her off. And you're not going to get it. Get out of my apartment. As they left, my father said, you'll regret this. When you've cooled down and want to come back, don't forget to bring your checkbook. The next day, I changed my phone number and blocked them on all social networks, including the professional ones, where my father suddenly tried to make contact. Jake helped me move to another part of town to avoid unwanted visits. I needed a complete fresh start. Signing the lease for the new apartment felt unreal. For the first time, I was truly on my own, by my own choice. After leaving the family drama behind me, I threw myself completely into starting my business. About $180,000 went toward buying equipment, an industrial saw, a lathe, planers and jointers, and other tools. I rented a 2,000 square foot hall in an industrial area outside the city and took care of the legal formalities. Company registration, insurance, accounting, website development. All of this turned out to be more complicated and expensive than I had assumed. Permits, liability insurance, and employer contributions required strict compliance with regulations, and I did everything by the law. I had always been good with my hands. During my college years, I worked on construction sites, and furniture design had long been my hobby. I studied various techniques, from Japanese joinery to Danish modernism. Now it became my profession. For several weeks, I set up the workshop, organized the workstations, and installed dust extraction systems. I hired Devin, an experienced carpenter I had met in an online forum for this subject. He was 45 years old, tired of mass production, and his skill level was top-notch. He agreed to a lower salary because he believed in my idea, quality over quantity. I never forgot that vote of confidence. Few would take the risk with a startup, he later said to me. But in your sketches, there's a vision. That's rare. Hearing something like that from a man with 20 years of experience was very valuable. For 2 months, we prepared the workshop, bought eco-friendly woods like walnut, maple, and cherry, and designed the first line of high-end furniture. Clean lines, modern style, and traditional craftsmanship. I named the company Legacy. Our motto was, create the family heirlooms of the future today. I spent a lot of time on the logo to achieve perfection. We launched the website, opened social media profiles, and started contacting interior designers. The first commission came from a friend of Cole's who was renovating his restaurant and needed custom tables. It was a small amount, but it was a start. 3 months after cutting ties with my parents, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Alex. Dude, the parents are going crazy because you're ignoring them. They're telling everyone you had a nervous breakdown. Just give them the money and end this circus. I didn't reply, but forwarded the screenshot to Jake. He commented succinctly, in plain English, their cash cow has left the farm. A week later, I received an email at the company address from my mother. The subject line read, "Read this, my son." It contained a long text full of accusations and manipulation about how much they had sacrificed for us and how much my selfishness hurt them. Not a word of acknowledgement of their favoritism or an apology. In the meantime, Devin and I worked ourselves to the bone. 14-hour workdays were the norm. Local customers came through word of mouth. One designer used our furniture in an interior that was featured in a magazine. We were mentioned in an article, and suddenly a queue of customers formed. Life was hard but wonderful. For the first time, I was living by my own rules, without seeking the approval of those who had never given it to me. I continued going to the boxing studio twice a week to keep a clear head. Cole was always interested in my progress and genuinely proud of what I was building. "You're creating something real," he once said, "something that belongs only to you. No one can take that away from you." From Jake, I learned that Alex had dropped out of the university in New York after his third year. Apparently, the studies were too difficult and the support wasn't enough. Without me as a point of comparison, my parents were now demanding more from him, and he couldn't handle the pressure. I felt not a shred of sympathy. Welcome to my world, brother. 18 months passed. The workshop flourished. Our team grew to 8 people. We moved to a 5,000 square foot space with excellent lighting and ventilation. We opened a showroom in a trendy neighborhood of the city. The furniture sold for prices between $5,000 and $15,000, and the waiting list stretched to 6 months with a required 50% deposit. One of our dining tables ended up in the home of a celebrity, which got us a publication in a prestigious architecture magazine. I was called a master whose work should be watched. I bought a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I converted the detached garage into a private workshop. Thanks to a large down payment, the mortgage rates were even lower than the rent. Around the same time, I started dating Leah. She was an architectural historian and came to our showroom as part of a renovation project. Smart, sharp, she saw right through me and genuinely respected my work, something I had never received from my own relatives. Life was normalizing. In less than 2 years, I had gone from an employee to a business owner. The boxing studio was still my outlet. Cole even trusted me to help train beginners. I had built a reliable circle of friends, far from the family chaos. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing the approval of others, no longer accumulating anger inside me, but feeling only satisfaction. Then the economic situation suddenly worsened. Interest rates shot up, the housing market collapsed, jobs began to disappear. Our waiting list shortened from 6 to 3 months, but we had a solid financial cushion and wealthy clients who weren't as badly affected by the crisis. We optimized costs, used materials more sparingly, and kept the entire workforce together. My top priority was to have no layoffs. What I did not expect, however, was how much my parents would suffer from it. Through third parties, Jake's mother, who ran into my aunt at a store, I found out that they were in a dire situation. My father was laid off from his management position at the age of 55. He was considered too expensive, but he was still too young for retirement. The company he had served for over 20 years simply showed him the door with a mediocre severance package. All their savings had been spent on Alex's failed educational attempts. It turned out that after NYU, he had tried 3 different master's programs, but dropped out each time. To maintain the appearance of successful people, including membership in a country club they couldn't afford, they had maxed out the limits of 6 credit cards. Now they were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. I didn't make contact. They had created this situation themselves. Part of me felt fleeting compassion, because no one deserves to lose their roof over their head. But a much larger part remembered how they had treated me my entire life, which had ultimately led to the final argument over my lottery win. They had never apologized or admitted their bias. Time and again, they had chosen Alex. Now they would reap the fruits of their decisions. One evening, as I was about to close the showroom, I saw them. My parents were sitting in their beat-up Honda in the parking lot. They looked desperate. I almost walked the other way, but my curiosity won out. Through the driver's side window, I asked what they wanted. My mother was crying, and my father couldn't even look me in the eye. He mumbled that the bank was going to foreclose on the house next week. My mother begged for help, asked for at least a loan, promising to pay it back. I couldn't help but laugh. That sounded like Alex's promises to pay back the money for the Stanford studies. No chance. My father asked for help again, and I could see how much it physically pained him to beg. They had nowhere left to live. I remembered all the years I had been second best to them, all the privileges they had given Alex while I struggled to survive. I remembered how they had made me feel worthless, and now they were coming to me. A bold idea came to me. I offered to buy their house from the bank so that they could rent it from me at the local market rate. Their faces fell. My mother reminded me that they were my parents, as if that meant anything after everything that had happened. I replied that I was their son, the same one they had cast out and who had never been good enough. It would be either a business deal or nothing. They had no choice. The eviction was only days away. They accepted my terms. The next day, I contacted the bank and arranged to buy the property at a price lower than their debt. Banks prefer a secure transaction to a lengthy foreclosure process. Thus, I became the landlord of my own parents. To avoid personal contact, I hired a management company and had them sign a real lease with all the standard clauses. I charged them a rent that exactly matched the local market rate without any family discounts. I also required a higher security deposit than usual due to their recent financial history. Business is business. The real reckoning came a month later when Alex showed up at my showroom. He looked bad, having apparently stopped taking care of himself. The designer clothes had been replaced by wrinkled bargain bin items, but his self-entitlement remained. He sauntered among the $10,000 dining tables, trying to act casual. He said I had done quite well for myself and then got to the point. He needed a job. Arguing that my business was doing well, he offered his help in management, mentioning the courses at NYU. I finished the sentence for him. Before you dropped out, I informed him that we didn't need any administrative help, as the company was profitable and stable. Alex tried to play the family card, as if the last 20 years of unfair treatment didn't exist. Funny how you're only family when he needs something. His mask crumbled. He admitted that he had neither a degree nor any skills. He was living with his parents, but because of the house situation, not even a fast food place wanted to hire him. I could have simply thrown him out, but something better occurred to me. We needed someone for workshop cleaning and deliveries. His face lit up, but I immediately made the conditions clear. Minimum wage, no special treatment, and reporting to Devin, not to me. Any mistake would mean immediate termination. On Monday at 7 in the morning, Alex showed up, surprisingly, on time. Devin listed his duties: sweeping sawdust, taking out the trash, cleaning toilets, polishing finished furniture before shipping, loading the van, and helping with on-site assembly. By lunchtime, he had blisters on his hands, and by the end of the day, he looked like he had come from a war. In the evening, I accidentally overheard his phone call with his mother. He complained about the heavy physical labor and about how I supposedly just watched him suffer. Meanwhile, I spent almost the entire day in the office with drawings and emails. But playing the victim was familiar territory for Alex. I let him speak. He had never worked a real day in his life. Everything had always been handed to him. This was his first experience with earned money, the same work that millions of people do every day without complaint. It was exactly how I had financed my studies while he was getting an allowance from his parents. At the end of the week, I gave him a check. His face showed disappointment at the amount: $580 for 40 hours at $14.50 per hour. He stared at the check as if a zero were missing. I congratulated him on the minimum wage experience and remarked that he might now understand why I had studied so hard. I didn't mention that the other employees earned significantly more. Carpenters started at $25 an hour plus benefits, and Devin's income was approaching 6 figures. Alex first had to grasp the value of work. He lasted 3 weeks, then he started coming in late. Devin issued a warning. When it happened again, he fired him on the spot. Alex stormed angrily into my office, shouting that I couldn't allow him to be fired, that he was my brother. He excused himself with traffic and being only 30 minutes late. I calmly replied that the rules had been clear in advance. No exceptions. He accused me of gloating over his misfortune while I lived in prosperity, claiming that I had always begrudged him his success. I disagreed, saying that I didn't take pleasure in his difficulties, but it did please me to see him finally confronted with the consequences of his actions, consequences from which his parents had always shielded him. If he had learned this lesson at 16 instead of 22, he wouldn't be in this situation. Alex lost his temper and became insulting, claiming that I had just gotten lucky with the lottery ticket, and without it, I would be a nobody. That made me laugh. I had built this business before the win. The money had only accelerated the process, but even without it, I would have had my education, my skills, and my hard work. Things he couldn't boast about. I threw him out of my office. That same evening, my angry parents called, accusing me of cruelty. I listened to them and briefly explained that in the real world, you get fired if you don't do the work. My mother tried to argue with guilt, talking about family mutual support. I asked where that mutual support had been when I had 3 jobs to pay for my studies while they spent everything on Alex? Where had their loyalty been when I couldn't pay my rent because of pneumonia? Family relationships are a give and take, and I was simply giving them the same support I had received, which was none. At the moment, my brother, the former golden child, is working at a gas station for just above minimum wage. My parents are paying me rent for the house that used to belong to them. I earn more than they could ever have imagined doing something I love. Perhaps this seems petty, but after a lifetime of being valued for nothing, seeing their dependence on me feels just. Sometimes I check with the property management company to see how my tenants are doing. My father has found a job at a large hardware store. Alex still lives with them and contributes about $200 a month from his gas station earnings. My mother had to sell most of her designer jewelry to pay the security deposit. Cole from the boxing studio says that over time I should think about forgiveness. Not for their sake, but for my own. He believes that resentment weighs you down, but that doesn't mean you have to let those people back into your life on the same terms. Maybe someday I'll be ready for that. For now, I am content with the distance and the boundaries I have set. Leah and I are discussing an engagement. She knows my whole story and is very supportive. She says that chosen family is sometimes better than the one you are born into. And she is right. The people who are truly there for me, Devin, Cole, Jake, Leah, mean far more to me than the biological ties that cause me so much pain. This is my story, from unloved son to successful entrepreneur and landlord of my own family. Life really does take strange turns sometimes.